When my daughter told me I had 48 hours to vacate my family home of 40 years, I collapsed in the hallway where she'd taken her first steps. 3 days later, I was living in a dingy motel room while she hosted a housewarming party in my house. That's when I realized blood ties can become nooses if you're not careful who's holding the rope. If you're watching this, hit subscribe and tell me where you're from. Because trust me, this story twists more than a tornado in Texas, and you'll want to be here for every shocking turn. I never thought I'd be homeless at 62. My name is Helena, and until recently, I lived in the charming country house that had been in my family for generations. Every inch of that place held memories: the kitchen where I taught Isabella to bake, the garden where my late husband proposed, the creaky third stair that announced midnight snackers. The morning everything fell apart was deceptively beautiful. April sunshine poured through my kitchen windows as I prepared Isabella's favorite breakfast: blueberry pancakes with real maple syrup. She was visiting for the weekend, something increasingly rare since she'd moved to the city for her corporate job. "Mom, we need to talk about your living situation," she said, her voice oddly formal. She hadn't touched her pancakes. I laughed nervously. "What's to discuss? I'm perfectly fine here. The thing is, Dad's will left the house to me." Her words hung in the air like smoke. "That's impossible. Issue my head. We bought this house together before you were born." She slid a document across the table. "His last will, dated 6 months before he died. He left you the investments, but the property is mine, and I've decided to sell it." Derruntilted se devais. James had been gone 3 years, taken by a sudden heart attack. We'd been married for 35 years. I thought I knew everything about him. "There must be a mistake," I whispered, hands trembling as I reached for the paper. "No mistake. I've had it verified by 2 lawyers. Isabella checked her watch. "I've already accepted an offer. The new owners want possession immediately. I found you a nice senior apartment." Senior apartment. I was only 62. Active, e out, independent. "I need time to process this," I said. "You have until Monday." Her tone was businesslike, as if we were discussing a minor schedule change instead of my entire life. Script part separator, My world collapsed in that moment. The daughter I'd raised, the one I'd read bedtime stories to, nursed through chickenpox, taught to drive, was evicting me from my own home. "Isabella, this is crazy. Your father would never." "He did, Mom. And I've waited 3 years to act on it. You've had plenty of time here." She pulled out her phone, scrolling through messages as if my breakdown wasn't worth her full attention. 3 days isn't enough to pack 40 years of memories, I protested. "I virei de mover-se. They'll store whatever doesn't fit in your new place." She smiled thinly. "It's better this way. This house is too much for you to manage alone." But I wasn't alone. I had friends nearby. A community. My garden. My life. That weekend was a nightmare. Isabella shadowed me as I moved through rooms, deciding what few possessions I could take. Family photos. My wedding album. James' watch. "The furniture stays," she said. "It's period appropriate for the house." It's my furniture. Actually, it's mine now. And I'm being generous letting you take anything. Monday came too quickly. A small moving van waited in the driveway. The senior apartment turned out to be a dingy 1-bedroom in a complex 30 miles from everything I knew. As I handed over my keys, Isabella's expression shifted. Something flickered in her eyes, not remorse, but triumph. "I always hated this place," she muttered. "Dad knew that. Yet he always said I'd appreciate it someday." That's when I realized this wasn't just about money. This was revenge for some perceived childhood slight, some resentment she'd nursed for decades. 2 days later, scrolling through social media in my dismal new apartment, I saw it. Photos of Isabella hosting a lavish housewarming party in my home. My friends were there, looking uncomfortable but present. My garden had been ripped out for a fire pit. Something broke inside me. And something else, something steely and determined, took its place. Script part separator, I spent that night crying into my late husband's sweater, but by morning, a strange calm had settled over me. I'd never been a vengeful person, But something about seeing stranger champagne glasses on my grandmother's antique table ignited a fire in me. "This isn't right, James," I whispered to his photo. "You wouldn't have done this to me." I called my friend Margaret, one of the few who hadn't attended Isabella's party. "Helena, I've been worried sick." "What happened?" Her voice was a lifeline. When I explained, she gasped. "That doesn't sound like James at all." "He adored you." "Apparently not enough to secure my future." "No, that's not what I mean. James told me specifically." She paused. 2 months before he died, we were talking about wills. He said he'd set everything up so you'd always have your home. A tiny spark of hope flickered. Then why does Isabella have a will saying otherwise? I don't know, but something's not right. You need a lawyer, Helena. Finding an attorney wasn't easy on my limited budget, but Margaret's son-in-law agreed to see me as a favor. Paul Wilson wasn't impressive at first glance, rumpled suit, cluttered office, but his eyes were sharp when I explained my situation. "Mrs. Lawson, wills don't just appear. They're filed, witnessed, recorded." He frowned at the copy Isabella had given me. "Who was your husband's attorney?" "Arthur Klein, but he retired last year." Paul nodded. "Let's start there. And I want to see your husband's financial records. All of them." For the first time since that terrible breakfast, I felt a glimmer of control returning. I wasn't helpless. It could fight back. That night, I couldn't sleep. Memories flooded in, not just of the house, but of Isabella. Her childhood tantrums when she didn't get her way. The coldness that developed in her teen years. Her gradual distancing after college. The way she'd changed after taking that corporate job 5 years ago. Had I raised a stranger? Or had I been blind to who she really was all along? Script part separator ===. The next morning, I began my own investigation. Fast stop, de count records office. The clerk, a sympathetic woman with reading glasses perched on her nose, helped me search property records. "Here it is," she said. "Deed transferred to Isabella Lawson 3 months ago." 3 months. But she only told me last week. The clerk showed me the signature. It looked like James's, but something seemed off about it. "I'd like copies of everything," I said. Armed with documents, I visited our old bank. Martha, who'd been our teller for decades, recognized me immediately. "Helena, we've missed you. How's retirement?" When I explained my situation, her smile vanished. "That doesn't sound right. Mr. Lawson was very clear about providing for you." She checked records, then leaned forward. "Your husband opened a safe deposit box 2 weeks before he passed. Isabella accessed it last month." My heart pounded. "Can I see it?" "I'm afraid it's been cleared out." That evening, Paul called. "Helena, I've found something. Klein's successor had your husband's files. There's another will, dated after the one Isabella showed you." I gripped the phone. "What does it say?" "It's complicated. We need to meet." And, he hesitated, "Bring any financial records you have. There are discrepancies I can't explain." The next day, in Paul's office, he laid out the bombshell. "This later will leaves you the house unconditionally. It specifically revokes all previous versions." He pointed to a clause. "And this part troubles me. It mentions protection from undue influence." What does that mean? It means James suspected someone might pressure him to change his will. Paul's expression was grim. "There's more. Large withdrawals from your joint accounts in the months before his death. Transfers to offshore accounts." I felt sick. Isabella works in international finance. That's not all. Paul handed me a letter. This was with the will. "It's addressed to you." With trembling hands, I opened it. "Helena, my love," James had written. "If you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. Script part separator ===. My heart pounded as I read James's letter, each word a knife twisting deeper. "Helena, my love, if you're reading this, something has gone terribly wrong. I've suspected for months that Isabella has been manipulating financial documents. Strange phone calls, missing papers, questions about our assets that felt wrong. I've created this secure will to protect you. The house is yours. I've structured it legally so she cannot touch it. There's also evidence in the family safe behind the painting in my study, financial records, recorded conversations with Isabella, and documentation of what I believe is a larger scheme involving her company. Trust no one except Arthur Klein. I fear I may not have time to address this myself. I love you eternally. James. I looked up at Paul, tears streaming down my face. She knew. She knew about this letter and destroyed it. Paul nodded grimly. The safe deposit box. That's why she needed to get in there before approaching you. But the safe in the study. If it's still there, we need that evidence.
How?
She's living in the house. We need a court order, and fast. Based on this will and James's letter, we can file for an emergency injunction preventing her from selling the property. That night, I couldn't sleep. Images of James, alone with his suspicions, battling to protect me even as his health failed, haunted me. Why hadn't he told me? What had our daughter been involved in that concerned him so deeply? The next morning brought another shock. My bank account, the one with my modest savings from James's life insurance, was empty. Withdrawal made yesterday, the bank manager explained. You authorized your daughter as a signatory last week. I did no such thing. The signature on the form looked like mine, but I'd never signed it. Identity theft, Paul said when I called him in a panic. And I bet I know who did it. We filed police reports, but the real blow came that afternoon. A letter arrived at my apartment, an eviction notice. Rent hadn't been paid. Isabella hadn't just taken my home. She was systematically erasing my entire existence. Script part separator, I was standing at the precipice of complete ruin, but something hardened inside me. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about justice. We need to move faster, I told Paul the next morning. She's trying to leave me with nothing. The emergency hearing is scheduled for Friday, he said. But without the evidence from that safe. An idea struck me. Margaret's son works for a security company. The one that installed our system years ago. 2 hours later, I had my answer. The system logs show it was disarmed 3 times last week during hours Isabella was at work, Margaret reported. Someone else has access.
Who?
I wondered aloud. The answer came in the form of a Facebook photo. Isabella at her housewarming party, arm wrapped around a tall man I recognized with a jolt, Robert Klein, Arthur's son and James's godson. Paul, does Robert Klein work at Isabella's company? The silence on the phone was answer enough. He's their financial controller, Paul finally said. Helena, this is bigger than we thought. That night, my neighbor from the senior complex knocked on my door. Package came for you, she said. Inside was a USB drive and a note. Mrs. Lawson, found this while cleaning out my father's files. Dad always said to help you if you ever needed it. Arthur Klein Jr. My hands trembled as I connected it to my laptop. There were hundreds of files, financial records, emails between Robert and Isabella dating back 5 years, and most damning of all, a scanned document showing a scheme to funnel company pension funds through offshore accounts. They were using your home as collateral, Paul explained after reviewing the files. James discovered it and threatened to expose them. Are you saying my husband was murdered? I don't know. But his convenient heart attack certainly solved problems for certain people. The evidence was explosive, but we still needed what was in that safe. And time was running out. Script part separator, I woke Thursday morning to pounding on my apartment door. The motel manager stood there, face grim. You need to leave now. Your credit card was declined, and your daughter just called saying you're not authorized to use it. Another humiliation. Another trap. By noon, I was sitting in a diner with my suitcase, calling the few friends who hadn't abandoned me. No one answered. More coffee. The waitress eyed my suitcase with pity. Infine, Ilid. My phone rang, an unknown number. I answered desperately. Helena Lawson. A woman's voice, unfamiliar. Yes. This is Detective Rivera. We need to speak about your husband's financial records. My hands shook. I was just going to call the police. My daughter. Not over the phone, she cut in. Meet me at the station in an hour. Detective Rivera was younger than I expected, with shrewd eyes that missed nothing. We've been investigating Meridian Financial for 6 months, she explained. Your husband's records appeared in an anonymous tip last week. I showed her the USB drive. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the files. This connects all the dots, she murmured. Mrs. Lawson, did you know your husband had contacted us before his death? The room spun. What? She pulled out a file. James Lawson met with us 3 times. He believed his godson and daughter were involved in embezzling pension funds. He was gathering evidence. My James, carrying this burden alone. The day before he died, Rivera continued, he called to say he had conclusive proof. But then, his heart attack, I whispered. Rivera's face remained neutral. We couldn't prove anything suspicious about his death. But this new evidence changes things. What happens now? We need what's in that safe. Tomorrow, we'll accompany you with a court order. I left the station with a strange mix of vindication and horror. My husband hadn't just been betrayed by our daughter. He might have been murdered because of it. Script part separator ===. That night, I slept in my car. Humiliating, yes, but something in me refused to bend. I wasn't going to call Isabella begging for help, not when tomorrow might change everything. Morning came with rain tapping on the windshield. I changed in a gas station bathroom, trying to look presentable for court. My reflection showed a woman I barely recognized, thinner, harder, with eyes that had seen too much. The courthouse loomed like a fortress. Paul was waiting on the steps. Ready? He asked. As I'll ever be. Inside, we found Detective Rivera with 2 officers. The courtroom was nearly empty, just a clerk, the judge, and at the defendant's table, Isabella and Robert Klein with a slick-looking attorney. Isabella's eyes widened when she saw me with the police. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across her face. The judge, an older woman with steel-gray hair, reviewed our emergency petition. This is highly unusual, she said, scanning the documents. You're claiming your daughter forged a will, emptied your accounts, and is obstructing an investigation? Yes, Your Honor, Paul responded. And we have evidence suggesting the late Mr. Lawson's concerns about financial crimes were well-founded. The judge turned to Isabella's attorney. Response. The lawyer stood. This is a family squabble being dressed up as something sinister. Mrs. Lawson is simply unhappy with her husband's valid will. I watched Isabella's face. The confident mask was back, but her fingers tapped nervously on the table. I have here, the judge said, 2 contradictory wills. One leaving the property to Ms. Isabella Lawson, dated 8 months before James Lawson's death. Another, witnessed and notarized, dated 6 weeks before his death, leaving everything to his wife. Script part separator ===. Isabella's attorney interjected. The second will was never properly filed, Your Honor. Because someone intercepted it, Paul countered, producing affidavits from Arthur Klein and his office manager. Mr. Klein sent it for filing, but it mysteriously disappeared. The judge's eyes narrowed. I'm granting the emergency injunction. No assets to be transferred pending investigation. She looked directly at me. And I'm authorizing immediate access to the safe mentioned in these documents, accompanied by law enforcement. Isabella's face drained of color. She whispered urgently to Robert, whose expression had gone from confident to cornered. 2 hours later, I stood in my former study, watching as officers removed the painting of the lake where James had proposed. Behind it was the wall safe I'd forgotten existed. Do you know the combination? Detective Rivera asked. I shook my head, then paused. Wait. Our anniversary? Too obvious. Isabella's birthday? James wouldn't use that if he suspected her. Then it hit me. Try 071085. What is that date? Paul asked quietly. The day we bought this house. The safe opened with a click. Inside was a thick manila envelope labeled evidence, a smaller envelope with my name, and a voice recorder. Detective Rivera documented everything before handing me the envelope with my name. Inside was another letter and a flash drive. Helena, if you're reading this, you've discovered what I feared. The recorder contains conversations with Isabella and Robert discussing their scheme. The flash drive holds financial records tracing their embezzlement of over $20 million from employee pension funds. I've arranged for this evidence to reach authorities should anything happen to me. I never wanted to believe our daughter capable of this, but I cannot ignore the truth. I'm sorry I kept this from you. I thought I could fix it. I was wrong.
Oh my love, James. Tirstria dão mai fez as detetive Rivera plugged in the recorder.
James's voice filled the room, then Isabella's.
Dad, you're overreacting.
It's just creative accounting. It's fraud, Isabella. You've stolen millions from people's retirement funds. Nobody will find out if you keep quiet.
Sign the papers transferring the house to me. We need the collateral. NDF refuse?
Her laugh chilled my blood. Accidents happen, Dad. Even to healthy men. Script part separator ===. I sank into James's chair, my legs unable to hold me. It wasn't just fraud. It was a threat. My daughter had threatened her own father. Detective Rivera's face hardened as she listened. The recording continued, revealing more details of the scheme, how they'd used my home as collateral for loans to cover their tracks, how Robert had altered documents, how they planned to liquidate everything and disappear to a country without extradition. Isabella appeared in the doorway, flanked by officers. Her eyes met mine, not with remorse, but with cold calculation. You won't win this, she said flatly. You're nothing without Dad's money. I never needed money, Isabella. I just needed a daughter who knew the difference between right and wrong. Her mask slipped. For a moment, I saw something like fear. You don't understand what they'll do to me.
They?
Detective Rivera asked sharply. Isabella's lawyer appeared, ending the conversation. My client has nothing more to say. As they led her away, I remained in James's study, surrounded by the evidence of his final battle. A battle to protect not just me, but the thousands of people whose retirements had been stolen. Paul touched my shoulder gently. This is far from over, Helena. But you've won the first round. That night, back in my car, my phone lit up with messages from former friends, people who'd believed Isabella's lies now seeing her arrest on the evening news. Their apologies meant little. I discovered who truly stood by me, and it was a very short list. The next morning, the story broke nationally. Corporate fraud scheme uncovered. Daughter framed mother. My phone rang constantly, reporters, talk shows, old acquaintances suddenly remembering our friendship. Script part separator ===. I ignored them all, except for one call, from the judge. Mrs. Lawson, given the circumstances, I'm issuing an immediate order restoring your ownership of the property. You can return home today.
Home.
The word brought both comfort and pain. The house felt different when I walked in that afternoon. Isabella had already changed things. New furniture, repainted walls, my garden destroyed. It was like walking through a familiar dream where everything is slightly wrong. Detective Rivera accompanied me. We need to process the scene properly. There may be more evidence. In the master bedroom, she found something I'd missed, a hidden camera in the smoke detector. They were watching your husband, she explained. They needed to know what he knew. I sat on the edge of my bed in my house, and let that sink in. My daughter had spied on her own father in his final months, watching for signs he was onto her scheme. Paul arrived with more news. Meridian Financial is in chaos. 5 executives arrested. And they found accounts in the Caymans with most of the missing millions. What about the people who lost their pensions? There's a good chance they'll recover most of it. A small comfort, but something. That night, alone in my restored home, I wandered from room to room. Each space held memories, both beautiful and now painful. In Isabella's childhood bedroom, I found photo albums she hadn't bothered to destroy.
Pictures of a smiling little girl who once loved her parents without reservation.
Where had that child gone? When had money and power corrupted her so completely? Had there been signs I'd missed, moments when I could have steered her back to a better path? My phone rang again, a number from the county jail. I hesitated, then answered.
Mom.
Isabella's voice, smaller than I'd heard it in years. They're saying 20 years minimum. Script part separator equals. I couldn't speak for a moment.
20 years.
My only child would be middle-aged when she emerged. Mom.
Her voice cracked. Are you there?
I'm here, I said finally.
I need your help.
If you tell them I was manipulated by Robert, that I didn't understand what was happening. Stop. My voice was steady. We both know that's not true.
You don't understand.
These people in here. I don't belong with them. Neither do the retirees who lost everything belong in poverty. Neither did your father belong in an early grave. Silence stretched between us. Then, did you listen to all the recordings? Yes. Then you know what they said they'd do if we didn't cooperate. I was protecting you. A lie.
Another manipulation.
But for the first time, I heard real fear in her voice. Who was threatening you, Isabella? She lowered her voice. People above Robert. Powerful people. They used us to move the money. Tell that to Detective Rivera. If you cooperate fully, maybe.
You don't get it.
Her voice rose, panicky. They have people everywhere. Even in here. The line went dead. I called Rivera immediately. My daughter just called. She claims there are others involved, people who threatened her. We're investigating that angle, Rivera said carefully. There are discrepancies in the financial trail. The pension funds might be just one part of a larger operation. 2 days later, the headlines changed. Meridian financial scandal linked to international money laundering. Robert Klein was found unresponsive in his cell, rushed to hospital under guard. Script part separator equals. I couldn't sleep that night. If what Isabella said was true, if she'd been caught in something bigger than her own greed, was she in danger? Despite everything, she was still my daughter. The next morning brought news I never expected. Paul arrived at my door, face grim. Helena, Robert Klein died last night. They're calling it a suicide, but my blood ran cold. Where's Isabella? Protective custody. She's agreed to testify about an international money laundering operation involving politicians and corporate executives. Will she be safe? Paul hesitated. They're offering witness protection. Witness protection. My daughter would disappear. New name, new life. I might never see her again. That afternoon, I was allowed a supervised visit. Isabella looked small in her orange jumpsuit, dark circles under her eyes. Mom, she whispered. I'm sorry. I got in too deep. I searched her face for manipulation, for the calculating coldness I'd come to expect. Instead, I saw something I hadn't seen in years. My actual daughter, frightened and remorseful. Why, Isabella? We gave you everything. It started small. Favors for Robert. Then threats. Then it was too late to get out. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Dad figured it out. He confronted me, said he'd fix it. I told them he knew. The implication hung between us. Did they? I couldn't finish the question. She nodded almost imperceptibly. They have a way to induce heart attacks. Untraceable. My world collapsed again. Not just betrayal, but murder. I'm disappearing tomorrow, she continued. New name, new state. I'll never see you again. I reached across the table, touching her hand. Despite everything, some part of me, the mother part, couldn't let her go without saying what needed to be said. I love the daughter I raised. I don't know who you became, but I hope wherever you go, you find your way back to her. Her eyes filled with tears. For a moment, I saw a glimpse of my little girl again, the one who used to run to me with skinned knees and broken toys, believing I could fix anything. 6 months later, I sat in a packed federal courtroom for the trial of the century. Executives, politicians, and bankers filled the defendant's box. Isabella testified via video from an undisclosed location, her face partially obscured. I watched as she methodically dismantled the criminal enterprise, naming names, providing dates, explaining how retirement funds were siphoned into campaign coffers and offshore accounts. Her testimony was devastating and complete. The verdict came 3 weeks later, guilty on all counts. The stolen funds would be restored. Justice of a sort had been served. That evening, as I tended to my newly replanted garden, Detective Rivera visited unexpectedly. "Mrs. Lawson, I wanted to give you this personally." She handed me a sealed envelope. "Your daughter asked that you receive this after the trial." Inside was a key and a note. "Storage unit number 247, Airport Road. Some things you should have. I'm sorry for everything. I love you." The unit contained boxes of family heirlooms I thought lost forever, photo albums, James's records, my grandmother's china, and a USB drive labeled for Mom. On it was a video from Isabella, filmed the day before she entered witness protection. "Mom, by the time you see this, I'll be someone else somewhere else. I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know the truth. Dad never gave up on me, even when he discovered what I'd done. His last words to me were that he loved me and believed I could make better choices. I didn't deserve his faith then. I hope someday to deserve yours." A year has passed since that day. My house feels like home again, though quieter than before. Sometimes I imagine I hear James in his study, or a younger Isabella calling from upstairs. I may never see my daughter again. But somewhere with a new name and face, I hope she remembers who she really is, not just the woman who betrayed her family, but the child who was loved beyond measure. And perhaps, in that remembering, she finds her way back to herself. As for me, I've learned that family isn't just about blood. It's Margaret bringing groceries when I couldn't leave the house during the media frenzy. It's Paul checking in weekly to make sure I'm okay. It's the community that rallied around me when the truth emerged. The house stands strong, just as James intended. And so do I.